Hello and welcome to the 2024 Open Texas Conference. The Open Texas Conference is sponsored and convened by two cooperating organizations, the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, the state agency that serves as a resource, partner, and advocate for Texas higher education in Texas, and the Texas Digital Library, a library consortium providing services that enable free and open access to scholarly, cultural heritage, and educational materials. My name is Beatrice Canales, and I am an open education advocate at San Antonio College. I will serve as your moderator today. We welcome you to introduce yourselves and ask questions in chat. Please feel free to turn on your webcam, but mute your mic unless you're speaking. Also, please be aware that we are recording the session today. Recorded sessions will be available within the conference attendee hub for 30 days. Following the 30 days, the recordings will be accessible through the Open Texas YouTube repository. And I will add the YouTube channel to our chat. I will also place a link to the conference code of conduct in the chat for your information. This session is titled Crafting a Texas Tapestry Collaborative Curriculum Development. Thank you for joining us today. I will now turn it over to our session presenters so we can get started.
Hi there, my name is Krista Eshlemann, and I'm the English and Humanities Program Coordinator at Prairie View A&M University. And my colleagues will introduce themselves as they come on later. First, I just wanted to say I came to the D2S2 project with some experience developing digital curricula for our first year writing courses at Prairie View. And I'm going to get us started today by first giving some context to the D2S2 project and then discussing the opportunities and challenges that such a project created for its collaborators. And first of all, to define what this project even was, the project description says the following. The D2S2 program innovates the design and delivery of introductory high-demand courses. It's a partnership of Texas institutions with strong established track records of innovation in digital learning and student success that will develop, deploy, and scale high-quality introductory college course materials that incorporate innovative instructional design, current insights from the science of learning and development, open educational resources, and strategic integration of co-requisite instruction. Success interventions are also a key component, supplementing course instructional content via innovative pedagogical techniques. And the initiative aims to foster academic preparation and aid students all the way from high school to community college, transfer students, low-level undergraduates, lower-level undergraduates, and developing essential skills for college success and preparing them to pursue and achieve credentials of value. Ongoing research on student success will inform continuous improvement of course design, advance knowledge of effective methods for college preparation, and facilitate the adoption of successful course materials and pedagogical techniques across the state. It's a mouthful. So the curriculum for English also needed to make sure that we looked at the state core curriculum requirements. So for those who aren't in English, those were 4 key things. The first was critical thinking skills, creative thinking, innovation, inquiry analysis, evaluation, and synthesis of information, communication skills, effective development, interpretation, and expression of ideas through written, oral, and visual communication, teamwork skills, the ability to consider different points of view and to work effectively with others to support a shared purpose or goal. And then finally, personal responsibility, the ability to connect choice, actions, and consequence to ethical decision-making. To this end, a team was assembled, some of whom you will meet at this conference, composed of faculty representing 4-year universities, community colleges, high school dual credit programs. Our mission was to produce a kind of plug-and-play digital first-year writing curriculum that could fulfill state standards, be accessible, and also be flexible enough to be adapted for individual institutional requirements and needs. We were tasked with developing major assignments, instructor pacing guides, and selecting open access reading materials. The project was divided into two teams, one for English 1301 and one for English 1302. To start, both teams met together to establish some parameters and major themes and goals for each course, something akin to vertical alignment. We all came from diverse backgrounds and institutions that serve very different populations, ranging from A&M to community colleges to high school dual credit programs to Texas Women's to Prairie View, which is an HBCU. Our students are all coming to us with different levels of readiness and experience. Some institutions have very specific requirements, like a mandatory number of essays or words written in a semester, and some of us are required to give midterm or final exams. Some of us are required to teach literature. Some of us must hit both high school and college targets, and some of us are even representing technical programs that must focus their topics on writing for particular industries. In the end, this diversity became a great strength, but collaborating across the institutions was not without its unique challenges as well as opportunities, as we will share today. So I'm going to focus my comments now on the experience of the 1301 team. You'll hear about the 1302 team later in the presentation. So Dr. Sarah Fish and I worked on the 1301 team together, along with two other instructors that you can see there on the slide, Dr. Kim and Cooper from Collin County Community College, and Miss Kimberly Stelly, who teaches dual credit for Cy-Fair ISD and Lone Star College. Most of us did not know each other before we began our work. After a brief chat about our backgrounds, it became clear that a necessary place to start was with a listening session, during which we each shared our approaches to 1301 and our institutional requirements. We also imagined and researched needs of institutions that serve populations not represented by our four institutions, schools that might serve primarily ESL or immigrant populations, for example. We also thought about the varying degrees of instructor experience and training. This conversation proved pivotal to everything that followed because it allowed us to begin from a place of understanding our differences. We could then focus on a common goal, flexibility, and adaptability. We knew from the start that we could not build a prescriptive one-size-fits-all curriculum. We needed to leave room for nuance in students' needs and instructional and institutional requirements and instructor creativity. We knew that there could be no hills that we would die on unless that hill was in service to flexibility. From this listening session, we established some key commonalities. First, we realized that our students often come into first-year writing filled with anxiety, no matter their background. We also realized we needed to help our students feel more confident as both writers and readers. We acknowledge that students' personal connection to their texts and topics will increase the chance of greater engagement and therefore success. And we need to facilitate experiences that will encourage students to engage with scholarly and popular texts in responsible ways, but also encourage genuine curiosity and a sense that it's possible for their voice to join this conversation. From these commonalities, we began to dream in very big picture ways. What could be major movements that would lead students to a place of greater confidence and engagement with the scholarly writing process and better prepare them for success in 1302. What we developed were 4 major essays that focused on the following tasks. The first was a personal narrative. So starting with the familiar writing task felt necessary to bridge students from high school to college writing, to quell anxiety, and to provide a basic writing framework onto which we could build. The next was an introduction to rhetorical analysis. An analysis of a popular source would introduce information literacy as well as the rhetorical analysis process. The third was a scholarly article rhetorical analysis, which is an assignment that focuses on improving student strategies for locating and reading and integrating scholarly sources, and would prepare students for more sophisticated writing tasks while continuing to grow their analysis skills. And finally was a research-based argument. This essay would ask students to make their own argumentative moves and join the larger conversation about their topic using the sources that they have gathered and analyzed all semester, plus additional ones. With this sequence, we hope to slow down the writing process by encouraging more thoughtful research and more in-depth writing. While this may sound like a standard first-year writing course, what makes it different are the tracks that we developed. Starting with the first paper, students can pick a topic that resonates with them, be it related to a future career, hobby, or personal interest. Dr. Cooper called it a choose your own adventure course structure. When students pick a track, they will develop it all semester through all 4 papers, learning what it means to do a deep dive into the literature surrounding that topic, rather than a kind of drive-by, grabbing a quote and go type of research paper that they may have done in the past. By allowing them to pick their topic track, we hope that students will also be more invested in the course as a whole. We believe that the track model we built is the greatest strength of our collaboration, and one that would not have come forward if we hadn't started our work together with a listening session and an early shared understanding that we must create a curriculum that is adaptable. And to that end, we must be flexible ourselves. Our team worked together very well, and some of this may have been simply a stroke of luck in how our personalities mixed, but we also have reflected that there was a bit of more intentional alchemy involved, including a few quick final notes I will give as observations of what worked for us. First, we all checked our egos at the door. Compromise was the most important thing. We didn't take things personally or too seriously. We also laughed a lot. When we did disagree, the guiding question was what would offer the most flexibility while also still being in service to the end goal. We started with a big picture first, and we stayed out of the weeds. We decided early on that too much time in the weeds would slow us down and potentially cause us to lose focus on our major targets. And the weeds, we reasoned, are the place for individual instructors adapting their curriculum to their personal and/or institutional needs. We established sub-teams. We broke into pairs to brainstorm specific assignments and then came back together as a whole to workshop the big picture of how it could all fit together. This allowed for greater one-on-one collaboration at times. We identified specific roles for each person on the team. Some would research reading selections, while others would draft prompts and pacing guides. We all gave initial revision suggestions. And finally, we designated a cleaner, someone who would do the final edits for consistency of language and format, with a goal to make the curriculum sound like one unified voice rather than 4 separate instructors from 4 very different schools. I think I speak for my members of the 1301 team when I say that this approach worked pretty well, created a final product that we're proud of, and gave us some new ideas to try in our own classrooms, and gifted us with some new friendships going forward. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Dr. Sarah Fish, who's going to talk about our strategies for selecting our open access resources.
So I am Sarah Fish. I am coming out of the Collin College District, and specifically I'm at the technical campus. So I want to kind of focus on the strategies that we used to make sure we were finding the high quality in the resources that were promised kind of by the Texas Coordinating Board. We kept coming back to the Texas Coordinating Board's key goal that we provide, and this is the quote from the D2S2 explanation, high quality introductory college course materials, end quote. This was a reminder for us that we both wanted to ground the course in writing studies and rhetoric composition, while also ensuring that the open education and open access resources we selected are in fact high quality themselves. Krista noted our commitment to curricular flexibility, which extended to what we gathered for our readings. We curated content to allow instructors to select what best fits their institutional context and students' learning needs, but we were also careful in our curating processes, and I want to explain the 2 overarching strategies that were a part of our text selection. The first curating strategy we recommend for anyone doing this process is to work with readings and textbooks published and reviewed by those in the discipline of the course. Selecting material from scholars and practitioners in our field meant we were curating material based in the updated conversations about first-year writing, and we were connecting instructors with people who actively theorize and apply these strategies for teaching writing in their own classrooms. This was especially important too because while databases like OER Commons are great and have an overabundance of material, there's just a lot to sort through, and that can make it really hard to look for content and find the content. If we first look to the field most actively involved in our courses, then we might have a more efficient searching process. So what I have here on the slide are 2 major OER and open access resources from writing studies that made it easier for us to look through and curate our high quality readings. The WAC Clearinghouse is an established open education resource from writing studies scholars. It has an editorial team that promises peer review process for everything they offer, and that makes the content ultimately more reliable for locating up-to-date theory and practice for writing instruction. In fact, you can even find major scholarly works that are shaping writing studies conversations right now, like Asao Inoi's 2022 second edition for his labor-based writing contracts, or Annette V. et al.'s 2023 Text Gen Ed, Teaching with Text Generation Technologies, which is specifically about how do we work with and engage AI in our classrooms. So the WAC Clearinghouse has those pieces, but it also provides a lot of writing resources that any instructor who teaches writing might find useful. And that includes a big list of possible open access textbooks. One of the ones that we referred to consistently within our own project for 1301 is one called Writing Spaces that is available through the WAC Clearinghouse, but also has its own separate website. This was a go-to for our English 1301 readings because that textbook's primary goal has always been connecting students with rhetorically focused teaching and writing. It's now in its 6th volume about technical writing and is a book series that has been consistently peer-reviewed and edited by established scholars and practitioners in writing studies. Many of the chapter authors are active in the field, publishing their research, sharing their projects, and innovating writing instruction. The second discipline-based text that we incorporated was Bad Ideas About Writing, which the WAC Clearinghouse recommends in a list of books for teachers who assign writing, but doesn't come from the WAC Clearinghouse publisher, but from another. This book was edited and arranged by established scholars in writing studies. And in a 2018 plenary session for Elon University's Teaching and Learning Conferences, one of the editors actually spoke about this book as being a public-facing compendium for all of the scholarly conversations that are happening in writing studies, and that it was a text that was meant for teachers, for students, and anyone who needs to do writing. And like the Writing Spaces book, the authors for all of these chapters were active in the field. They're publishing research, sharing projects, and innovating their writing instruction. The second curating strategy that we recommend is based on how we expanded our search outside of the writing studies discipline while being mindful of 3 things. 1, the documentation of a peer review process for the text. 2, documentation of author teaching experience, and 3, documentation for teaching and textbook credentials. In this way, our team wanted to respect the value of knowledge that we gain outside the work of writing studies scholars, and instead look at what we might gain from people committed to teaching first-year writing students. So the first recommendation with this type of expanded curating is to really look for a peer review process in the text. This ensures that high-quality resource component, making the text more reliable for updating as things change. Like, let's say if MLA decides to go from 8 to 9 in the middle of a semester. So we included 2 resources with our 1301 materials that gave us really clear documentation for that peer review, and I have those listed on the slide as the Purdue OWL and OpenStax. The Purdue OWL's website has phrasing that suggests we are constantly working on developing and revising these materials, keeping the user's needs in mind. Our team is continuously exploring possibilities for a better design, prioritizing accessibility and user experience. And OpenStax, an easy to kind of navigate open education resource, also includes a peer review note within its content that all OpenStax textbooks undergo a rigorous review process. Our second recommendation, moving beyond maybe not having a peer review process, was to look at author teaching experiences and commitments to the course content as it was reflected in the readings and texts that we found. Searching something like OER Commons or even Pressbooks can provide a lot of options for reading. So when we couldn't locate clear peer review, we pivoted to include practitioner experience as part of our high quality component, acknowledging here the expertise that comes from that on-the-ground teaching. The textbook that we used, A Guide to Rhetoric, Genre, and Success in First-Year Writing, provided information about its primary authors and editors, indicating their experience with and their commitment to first-year writing. And the UNM Core Writing Collection could be easily explored and kind of searched within the department's web presence in the UNM website. The final recommendation is kind of looking for an expanded curation that has textbook credentials represented in a works cited of some kind. All the textbooks we pulled from had works cited that included prominent articles from writing studies, connections to other established textbooks. And again, these were things that help us know that this content was more reliable and thus was going to tick that box of more high quality resource. So as I close this part, I'll offer this curating process needed a lot of time so that we could hit that mark of high quality. But for us, it was also about providing instructors with choices. So across all of these voices and spaces, we were able to give instructors that flexibility to choose texts, even if it was worded in a different way or presented an idea in a different way. And we offered that variety of content so instructors can pick and choose readings to align with their student population needs. And we did this work so that other instructors wouldn't have to. So as we look to a summer 2025 Pressbooks publication for this particular set of English 1302 material, we're kind of happy to provide instructors with what we curated from this work. So in the end, they don't have to do all the work that we did.
We're picking up with thread 4. Myself and Dr. Quesenbury. So if you want to go ahead and click, that would be great.
Hello.
Hello, collaborating across institutions for English 1302, which we know very well. Thank you, Dr. Fish. If you want to click, that would be great. Thank you so much. So I'll introduce myself briefly, and we'll also add that Kathy and I go way back now because we were very fortunate to receive a THECB development grant back in 2021, where we did a cross-consortial OER textbook for our writing programs. And that was great. So, but my name is Dr. Jackie Hoermann-Elliott. I am the director of first year composition at Texas A&M University up in Denton, Texas. And I'm introducing a ghost member of our team today who couldn't be with us, but is wonderful and presenting elsewhere in the conference, which is Gwendolyn Inocencio, who is at Texas A&M University and was such a dynamic, wonderful, thoughtful, brilliant member of our team. And we had so much fun getting to know her and working with her. And then I'll let Kathy introduce herself.
Hello, I'm Kathy Quesenbury. I am at Tarrant County College. For my background, I taught 12 years at the high school level, and now this is my 17th year at Tarrant County College. And I also want to tell you the background of TCC. We have 5 campuses, almost 47,000 students. 26% of those are dual credit and early college high school students. So we have a wide range here. Sarah, if you could go to the next slide. And so I wanted to introduce that so you could understand the rationale of how we worked together, because, you know, we have 2 university level team members and then community college. So our starting points were common factors. They began with workshops that were provided from Texas A&M. One of the workshops was by Mary Perkins, and she covered accessibility issues and explaining things such as immersive readers and the check accessibility buttons that we should use when we go to publish. And then Kathy Anders covered copyright and Creative Commons licenses. And one of the issues that we had kind of struggled with was, as instructors and teachers, as teachers, we're used to using whatever we want in the classroom, but we had to switch our mindset to realize, you know, we're going to publish this on the internet. So what we can use in the classroom versus what we could publish, 2 completely different things. So that was one of the things that we really had to pay attention to. As for content, again, at the university level, composition 2 is rhetoric based, whereas for my institution, composition 2 is literature based. And we had lengthy discussions on how we could integrate those types of assignments that could apply to whichever course, Comp 2 course, anyone was teaching. And we found those common assignments or common core assignments, and that's what led us to our 4 units. So Sarah, if you could click to the next slide.
Thanks so much. And just to build off of what Kathy said, at Texas A&M University, we enroll usually around 2,500 students per semester in first year composition courses, and about 1/3 of those are dual credit students. And we have many students who are also in co-requisite courses for remediation because they're not college ready yet, which I'm sure many folks, if they teach first year writing or math in this audience, can understand that challenge that we face as a state. But to jump back into a curricular overview, so we're going to give you a little sense of what we made and then kind of move into some of the challenges or opportunities that we're reframing as to why we made them. So to get started, our English 1302 course, which was, guided by the THECB Lower Division Academic Course Guide Manual and best practices within the discipline, really focused on deepening students' understanding of research methodologies, critical analysis, and argumentation, preparing them for more complex academic and professional writing tasks that may lie ahead of them in their coursework and beyond. And our course that we designed really guides students through the processes of proposing and conducting community-focused research. And the sequence of curriculum progresses from a point at which we are introducing academic research contexts and then moving into developing research design and proposal skills, then developing an academic argument into an academic research essay, and finally developing visual and narrative translation skills to culminate into a collaborative PSA project through which students gradually develop their research and argumentation skills while also learning to adapt their academic work for different audiences and types of media. So alongside these, we'll just add, because each unit kind of culminates in a larger project, a major writing assignment of sorts. The following major assignments correspond as summative assessments for each unit that you see on screen. For Unit 1, we have an annotated bibliography. For Unit 2, a proposal. For Unit 3, an academic research essay. And lastly, for Unit 4, a public service announcement video.
For us, the concept of audience became a sliding scale. In some parts of the content that we were creating, we thought about the brand new instructor who needed all the details and all the directions and anything they might need because they're brand new and they haven't started collecting their content for themselves yet. But we also wanted to keep in mind the seasoned instructors and not overburden and bog them down with all this extra information. We also needed to keep in mind the locale where these faculty are teaching because we have embedded, we have dual credit, we have early college, high school instructors who are actually within those high school buildings as opposed to instructors who are on college campuses and university campuses. In other parts of our content, we were creating for students at all skill levels. And this is kind of a funny story for Jackie and I that Gwendolyn would write something for her Texas A&M students, and Jackie and I would both shake our heads and say, I don't think our students would quite understand that. You're going to have to bring it down just a little bit. So likewise, we have to consider the location of our students because some of them will be in the high school buildings or they'll be on college campuses, but some of them may not have access to resources such as students who are in the rural areas, and do they have Wi-Fi access? So we were trying to take all these considerations into or incorporate them within what we were offering and putting in the project itself.
So to continue in a similar vein with this idea of, we have challenges and that we're reframing as opportunities. What are those challenges? We're kind of thinking of them almost like case studies through which we think our team really grew and strengthened, and the curriculum under development got better and better. So for example, rubrics. When discussing rubrics, we consistently found ourselves with many questions. Initially, our thinking was, well, perhaps the easiest thing to do here organizationally and whatnot is to create rubrics in Excel sheets. And the team was really on board about that. But then we soon found out we had many questions that arose as we were working in these Excel sheets, questions such as the ones you see on screen. So what type of rubric is best suited for our audience of, multiple layers of audience, if you will, with the ones that Kathy just thought through. How do we frame the wording of criteria to empower students? So certainly we know writing instructors, writing faculty can use a range of criteria, right? Maybe the best to you is superior or exceeds expectations or meets expectations. And what does that communicate to students? And certainly staying away from criteria that or criterion that are described as poor, right? Unsatisfactory, or anything that might have intersectional implications or be offensive to one's culture. So then there's also this question of, well, how are points going to transfer? Like, what is the point value? We're all used to using different point systems, so we had to think through that. How will we communicate our values as a discipline too, right? And if you're familiar, if you're coming from the writing studies discipline, you know there are so many subfields, sub-disciplines within it. And what does one prioritize, right? We can't just make something incredibly generic that works for everybody. We will certainly do our best to accommodate many values within the discipline, but ultimately we had to make some decisions. And then, of course, going back to this idea of accessibility, what type of rubric is most accessible? So you can create an Excel sheet for a rubric, but then, columns need to be labeled, and we learned a lot through that process. So all of these questions are really interesting, and they might serve as discussion points later on when we have some time during the Q&A session. But these questions really helped us engage in meaningful and collaborative discussions about what we value as pedagogues and how we can honor best practices in our discipline while working with this broader audience. And if you're curious, ultimately, we landed on writing the criteria out because they're going to go into a Canvas shell anyway. And we have passed that torch to our wonderful, wonderful project coordinator, Annika Snyder.
Another opportunity that we encountered was videos, because we as instructors use video, all the time in our classroom, and realizing that you're putting it in your content to be published, that's a whole nother media, really. One of the things that we encountered was licenses. Does a video even have a license? If it does, where do you find it in the video? What type of license? Sometimes there are no licenses whatsoever, so can you use that? Other points of consideration is the link rot. How long will those links be viable, and will they be updated? Captioning and the accuracy of that captioning. Accessibility or other types of accessibility, such as contrast or colors, and how will viewers be able to access that? In the end, we did include our videos. Since the project is still being piloted, we're still working on, are we going to keep those videos? I'm sure some of them will be culled, just because the videos do present a unique challenge there.
Finally, one last case study of a challenge reframed as an opportunity, and then Kathy's going to bring it all together for us, is the final exam experience. It's a very interesting one for our discipline. In the humanities, we have a wide array of what we can do and many policies up for interpretation. So how does one develop a final exam experience when policies vary so widely across institutions? Or how do we consider, institutions that perhaps maybe require an exam to be offered on a specific day, or institutions that don't, or institutions that use a specific type of exam or format, face certain time constraints, and one's really prioritizing instructor autonomy and variance. So that last one's really interesting to us, because that's certainly the case at TW. But to start with my colleague at TCC, TCC, Tarrant County College, they're required to offer an exam on a specific day, and it is usually a short in-class writing exercise. Kathy, I think you said it's an analysis of sorts.
Correct.
Yes, and certainly we've had some of that at TW. We've had instructors do an in-class, like a reflective writing exercise. Gwendolyn, again at Texas A&M University, used the last week of class for presentations. And at TW, we do it all because we really pride ourselves on instructor autonomy and want to value that. And I think that's the case at Collin as well. So we have in-class reflective exercises, like the one I mentioned. We have gallery walks where, students create a multimodal artifact. Maybe on screen, we've got all the computers up and there's videos that people can go around and click through, or maybe there's actual artwork being displayed. Sometimes students have presentations at the end, and that can actually start before the final exam experience because, or we have to set certain time constraints so they only go so long so we can fit it all into that final exam experience. So, in portfolios, we could go on for a while. There are many, many more. But we ended up landing on the PSA because it's an exercise that several of us were already familiar with. It's one that I taught as a final exam experience when I was working on my PhD at Texas Christian University in Fort Worth. And again, kind of fits with that community action-oriented focus we wanted to offer as a track in the course. It's very versatile, we think, in that regard. It can be shared in class, recorded as a video. The D2S2 project here, we really focus on a face-to-face class as our audience, but certainly there are opportunities for expansion. And I think anything we've created could really easily be adapted to a fully online hybrid course or anything like that. The other nice thing about the PSA or the public service announcement is that there can be an accompanying reflection component. So certainly, students could work on creating this, submit it in advance of the final exam, and then do a reflective exercise in class. So it can be reflected on synchronously, asynchronously, whatever really works. So there's lots of room for adaptation here of any of the materials, and we recognize that. And I think the key takeaway idea here, again, because we're thinking about, well, what happens when we all collaborate and what do we learn from that, is how a writing instructor can design a final exam experience. And so we presented the PSA as one very fabulous option, but one that could also be adapted to suit other needs. And then here's Kathy's slide to take us
For the key takeaways over all this whole project that we decided on were, number one, begin with what you already know and what you already use, because you come with this experience that's highly valuable, and find the commonalities within your team to first establish that foundation and then work from there. Realize that you won't be able to predict any and all circumstances, especially when it's going to be published on the World Wide Web. You have no idea, in the future who's going to be accessing it or where. Include choices for your readers, include choices for faculty. What works best one day may not work the next day, or what works for one class may not work for the other class. And then finally, continue to share and revise and continue the collaboration. Writing is revising, and it's just that creation of work, the body of work. So that's what.
And to add that, I think our partnership was kind of a neat collaboration because we started with the THECB grant in 2021, and here we are still working together on different OER projects. So, and meeting new colleagues.
Yes.
Our new colleagues here with us. All right, so now is our time for Q&A, unless anybody else on the team has anything else they want to add. We have here, what questions or clarifications can we address from the audience? And then, of course, more information on the project. I will put my email in the chat in case anybody wants to contact me, or if I can answer any particular questions. But Annika is the expert on the project and knows a great deal about its status and what's forthcoming and all of that. But without further ado, I'll stop talking and we invite you all to discuss and ask questions.
I think it's great that even after when you first received training back in 2021, you said that you're still together, you know, doing the work. And like you said, it is a global viewpoint to have quality materials. And I think it's just really, really great and inspirational.
At times it was stressful, I'm not gonna lie, trying to crank out. But it was so much fun being able to continue working with Jackie. And also one thing that we did not mention is the Comp 1 team and the Comp 2 teams. We had meetings, scheduled meetings, and we collaborated across across the two projects as well. So yeah, it was good.
That's good. Thank you for mentioning that too, because we had many points where we stopped and asked ourselves, well, we should probably check and see what 1301 is thinking, because you know they have to speak to each other and they have to communicate. And then I also say I enjoy working with Kathy because, you know, many students at Tarrant County College, where she is, or Dallas College, come to Texas Women's University. We have a big health science population and nursing. Actually, about like a third of our student enrollment comes from Dallas, slightly more than any other comes from Dallas. And then it's Fort Worth, and then it's Denton County. So it's kind of interesting. And I, you know, get to talk with Kathy and know what she's doing. And that really helps with articulation, transfer, other questions like that.
There's a question. How did you go about encouraging faculty on your own campus to utilize OER? Was there pushback that you encountered?
Ooh, I can speak to that.
I was going to say, I feel like I've been talking a lot. And so I'll let Kathy and everybody else on the panel speak, and I'll chime in at the end.
Well, for our district, you know, we are a large district. We have 5 campuses, and that is one of we have a brand new committee, surprise committee, right? SLM, Student Learning Materials Committee, and that is our new push is to promote OER across our district. And so far it's been going really well. Instructors like the idea of pulling their own material and having it ready and course ready for the beginning of semester, rather than having to wait for textbooks to come in or having to wait for students to buy their textbooks. If, you know, faculty can just have it in their course shell, boom, ready to go. And they get to pick and choose what they need or what their students need, and that individuality and adaptability. So it's been pretty positive.
I can speak to what the reception at Prairie View. This is our 3rd year using OERs in our 1st year writing courses, and it was a top-down initiative coming out of COVID, when resources were just so difficult for everybody, and our students were struggling to afford their textbooks. The administrators asked a lot of us in the core, where can we find some OER materials and begin to make curriculum and revamp curriculum to make this easier for our students. And so since it came from the top down, it was an easier sell, I guess, because it was more of a university-wide initiative, and that helps everybody kind of see the benefits. Everything that Kathy just said, I always reiterate to our new instructors when we have new hires is this is a plug and play. Like, it's there in your course shell, ready to go. You don't have to wait for them to buy books. You don't have to worry about them not bringing their books to class or accessing their books or all those things. And you can customize how you use it when, and pull chapters here or there. It's just so nice and easy in that way. And so our experience at Prairie View has been very positive too with our instructors. It has not been a hard sell at all. Everybody's been excited.
At my institution, it's been a slower sell, but at the things that my colleagues have mentioned, like the dual credit students could have access to the book immediately, is a huge sell, because if we're at an off-campus site for dual credit, those students have to order from the Barnes & Noble or wait for an Amazon order or something that prevents that from happening, and getting access. I think where our biggest pushbacks have been is the lack of supplemental materials. OER projects are inherently like no cost for students and no cost or pay often for the writers. So there might not be a lot of supplemental material. There was actually somebody whose session was earlier today about using AI to help build out the supplemental to convince people to go OER. But we've also got a top-down kind of initiative up, but do this, do this. We also have within the state of Texas, like special grants for institutions that go completely OER. So that we have a lot of smaller schools that want to kind of adopt that because it means there's extra money to be had by making those adoptions.
I'll just add, as a writing program administrator, it's also been a really easy sell. When we showed the cost savings to our students of $197,000 per year, our instructors really rallied behind that and they were excited. It was, like Krista said, something kind of coming out of COVID. It felt like a way we could actually help our students. Occasionally I'll get asked by instructor, a dual credit instructor, in particular, because they might want to like fold some literature into their course. And I'll say, well, remember, we are an OER course. We have a website. There's a lot of culture, or culture of pride, I would say, at TW on us being OER advocates. And so, but if you're really interested in teaching this textbook, or teaching, Truman Capote's In Cold Blood, like, let's look into options where we can offset the cost so that students don't have to pay for it, right? Because certainly there are small grants across campus and we can figure something out. We also, in creating a big culture of support around OER, we have little things that we do too. So we have pursued, like Dr. Fish mentioned, the grants. We've had the development, the implementation now, and our library does a microgrants program where they provide $1,000 just for people to explore and adopt some OER in their courses. So that's been really nice because then they can reach a broad range of people who are just initially interested. That initiative came from Dr. Amanda Zarang, who is now a Dean of Libraries at UNT next door. And then we also have little things, like in my email, you'll see there's a little image that says, like OER instructor as like a point of pride. And I think, again, that's just building that culture of interest, and people ask, what does this mean if they don't know?
I really like that branding that you mentioned, Jackie, that to have that sort of pride that you are an OER, not just a champion, practitioner, instructor.
Maybe that is a future direction for the THECB as they do these academies and whatnot, is they can, have little micro credentials people can put in their email signatures, much like the ones that we see for AQ and other, professional organizations that do pedagogical training. I think people would really like that.
Yeah, Creative Commons has that too.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we have Courtney who said, thank you. I actually did my practicum with TWU's OER initiative in 2023. So she knows it's a great program. I actually did graduate from TWU from library school back in 2019, but that was before COVID, obviously just before COVID. And the curriculum did not really have an open ed component to it. So I did go to another session that did talk about maybe the beginning for a lot of librarians started library school for open ed.
Mm-hmm.
Just thought of another thing that we do at TCC when the students go to register for their classes. I can't remember the name of the little button. What's that called? But there's a little button on the class if it's OER, so that student will know that that class already includes their materials, that they won't have to buy a book. And so those classes will fill up first, right? So that's another incentive for faculty to start using OER as well, because those classes fill.
Yeah, and at Alamo colleges, we call it an attribute. But I do like the idea that students recognize that, because I can't say the same for some of the students I know, that they do not recognize what that means. So that's wonderful that your students do. They're also called course markers. If you have any questions, you're welcome to unmic yourself and open your video and or type in your question. We have one. Do you have a way to address students who would rather have an actual textbook?
A
So-
tip. Oh, go
I was
ahead.
gonna. Do you want to talk, Jackie?
No, go ahead.
Okay. On the writing spaces side of things, I use this one in my 1301 and 1302. You can actually get physical copies of the book, and even Bad Ideas About Writing, you can print and then bind. So what I've done is gotten copies of those and had them on reserve in the library where I teach. I've also directed students if they're like, I want to have a physical copy, because a lot of my students do, for as much as we call them digital natives, they kind of prefer something on paper, to encourage them to use up the printing options that they have in the library. A lot of campuses will have like a printing budget to allow students to print up to a number of copies. So I'll show them how to print things in ways that kind of minimize how much paper they might have to use, but they can also take that option if they'd like to.
I'm sorry, was there someone else who's going to speak about that?
The only thing I was going to add was just that with our development grant we've had in the past, it was a requirement that students needed to have the ability to print anything that we created for OER. And Pressbooks is great because there is a way for you to export a PDF of everything that is in the Pressbook shell. And so the goal right now of the project, from what I understand, is that, everything's going into Canvas initially, but there will be an associated Pressbook with it. So it will be something that students will have the ability to download a PDF of at some point. It's a great question from an accessibility standpoint.
I think also your story has resonated among so many other individuals who advocate for more funding and better access to materials from faculty to faculty, peer to peer, and to quality materials and supporting materials as well. I think that is something that we all feel because in this, and also, workforce programs, it's usually difficult to find materials because those aren't core courses usually, and we have to definitely look for the experts in that field to create those materials for sharing.
I can sort of speak to that because the campus that I'm at has the workforce programs, and my workforce 1301 students, well, are really glad that we have OER in 1301 because the textbooks for their automotive classes, their construction management classes, are $150. One of their automotive programs that's run through Cengage is over $200. I think there's a whole different set of priorities that happen in workforce instructor like the programs that they run. My workforce colleagues are teaching 9 classes in a semester, sometimes even 10. They're running on semesters that are 5 weeks long, and so they might not necessarily have the time or value doing that OER work. And so this is where the need for funding becomes really important in that particular area. If my workforce colleagues have to teach 9 or 10 classes in a semester and then can do freelance work in industry, there's not a lot of incentive for them to do this kind of teaching component or build out to make an OER resource to begin with. So I'm not sure if individual institutions could promote this so much as I think it coming from a bigger thing like the coordinating board would be useful to have instructors across the state get paid to be able to do this, and that pay be in alignment with what they could make in industry. It's just a really tough call. A lot of my workforce colleagues who are here, this feels like a very negative answer, but it's that kind of tense reality. They take a pay cut to come teach here. They could make into the 6 figures if they went out and did industry, but they have a commitment to teaching and to students and building up students like them. But they don't have to stay as long either. They don't want to commit to contracts for more than a year. So there's so many layered elements that make an OER workforce conversation messier and more complicated. Because I think for them, it would need to come back down to having the time to do it and also the pay lining up what they could make in their own industry spaces.
Victoria also mentioned that they are excellent points. Her institution supportive of OER and development of OER material. She is not sure that workforce needs have been considered, and it is true that about the pay cuts and that they really need to be incentivize these areas. Well, I just wanted to give another moment or two for anyone who has any last thoughts and or questions before we end. I just wanted to remind everyone that we do have a discussion board called Keep an OER Talkin' Texas and Beyond, and it will be opened after this session. So you're welcome to text or open up a video chat. And I just wanted to thank the attendees for participating in this session, and I'm going to let you know that this Zoom session will be closing. I will stop the recording.